October 27, 1962. For a few terrifying hours, humanity stood closer to extinction than at any other moment in history. Not during World War II. Not during the Cold War. Not even during the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But on one day. One single day. A series of decisions, misunderstandings, and military actions nearly triggered a global nuclear war. A war that could have killed hundreds of millions of people. Possibly even more. The world did not know how close it came to disaster. Most people went about their normal lives. They went to work, went to school, ate dinner with their families, completely unaware that civilization itself was hanging by a thread. This is the story of the day the world almost ended. To understand what happened, we need to go back to the years after World War II. The war had ended, but peace never truly arrived. Instead, two superpowers emerged: the United States and the Soviet Union. Both possessed enormous military power. Both distrusted each other, and both were determined to become the dominant force on Earth. The rivalry became known as the Cold War. Unlike previous wars, this conflict wasn't fought mainly with armies. It was fought through espionage, political influence, military buildups, and most dangerously of all, nuclear weapons. By the early 1960s, both nations possessed enough nuclear bombs to destroy entire cities within minutes. And if those weapons were ever used, nobody knew where the escalation would stop. Just 90 miles from the coast of Florida sat a small island nation, Cuba. In 1959, a revolutionary leader named Fidel Castro seized power. Soon afterward, Cuba formed a close relationship with the Soviet Union. For the United States, this was alarming. A communist ally of the Soviet Union now existed practically on America's doorstep. Tensions increased rapidly. Then things became even worse. In 1961, the United States supported an invasion known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. The operation failed, humiliating the United States and convincing Castro that another invasion was likely. So Cuba turned even more heavily towards Soviet protection. Meanwhile, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev saw an opportunity. The United States had nuclear missiles positioned near Soviet territory. So Khrushchev decided to place Soviet nuclear missiles inside Cuba. Secretly. The plan was bold and incredibly dangerous. If successful, Soviet missiles would be capable of striking major American cities within minutes. Construction began. Missile sites were built. Equipment arrived. Troops were deployed. And all of it happened largely in secret. At first. On October 14, 1962, everything changed. An American U-2 spy plane flew over Cuba. The photographs it captured shocked U.S. intelligence officials. The images clearly showed Soviet nuclear missile sites under construction. There was no doubt. The Soviet Union had placed nuclear weapons in Cuba. President John F. Kennedy was informed immediately. His advisors gathered. Military leaders proposed airstrikes. Others demanded a full invasion of Cuba. Some argued there was no time to hesitate. But Kennedy understood something terrifying. Any attack could trigger a Soviet response. And that response could escalate into nuclear war. After days of intense discussion, Kennedy chose a different strategy. Instead of invading Cuba immediately, the United States established a naval blockade around the island. American warships moved into position. Their mission was simple: stop Soviet ships from delivering additional military equipment. The world watched nervously. Soviet cargo ships continued approaching. American naval forces waited. One mistake, one misunderstanding, one trigger-happy commander, and nuclear war could begin. For days, tension increased. Around the world, people prepared for the worst. Schools practiced emergency drills. Families built fallout shelters. Governments developed evacuation plans. Military forces entered high alert. Strategic bombers carrying nuclear weapons remained ready for launch. Some crews sat inside aircraft for hours, waiting, prepared to begin a war that could destroy civilization. Then came October 27th, the most dangerous day. Historians now call it Black Saturday. Several events occurred almost simultaneously, and each one pushed humanity closer to catastrophe. First, an American U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba. The pilot was killed. Many military officials demanded immediate retaliation. At the same time, another U-2 accidentally entered Soviet airspace. Soviet fighter jets scrambled. American fighter jets carrying nuclear weapons launched to protect it. Suddenly, nuclear-armed aircraft from both sides were moving toward potential confrontation. The situation was spiraling out of control. But something even more dangerous was happening beneath the ocean. Deep underwater, a Soviet submarine named Soviet Submarine B-59 was being hunted by American naval forces. The crew had lost communication with Moscow. They were exhausted, overheated, and under immense stress. American ships began dropping practice depth charges. These were intended as warning signals. But the Soviet crew didn't know that. Inside the submarine, officers feared war had already started, and the submarine carried a nuclear torpedo. One officer wanted to launch it. If fired, the explosion could have triggered an immediate chain reaction leading to global nuclear war. Everything came down to one decision. One man. His name was Vasily Arkhipov. According to Soviet procedures, multiple senior officers had to agree before the nuclear torpedo could be launched. 2 officers supported launching. Arkhipov refused. He argued against it. He convinced the others to wait. The torpedo was never fired. Few people knew it at the time, but historians later concluded that his decision may have prevented nuclear war. One human decision, possibly saving hundreds of millions of lives. Behind the scenes, negotiations continued. Messages moved between Washington and Moscow. Eventually, a compromise emerged. The Soviet Union agreed to remove its missiles from Cuba. In return, the United States pledged not to invade Cuba. Secretly, America also agreed to remove certain missiles from Turkey. The crisis ended. The missiles were withdrawn. The blockade ended. And the world stepped back from the edge. The Cuban Missile Crisis lasted only 13 days. Yet those 13 days changed history. Leaders on both sides finally understood how dangerous nuclear escalation had become. New communication systems were established, including a direct hotline between Washington and Moscow. Both sides remained rivals, but they now possessed a clearer understanding of what nuclear war would mean. Mutuelle destruction. On a scale humanity had never seen before. Today, more than 60 years later, the Cuban Missile Crisis remains one of the most frightening moments in human history. Not because war happened, but because it almost did. The world survived because of restraint, communication, and a handful of individuals who chose caution over catastrophe. Most people alive today never experienced those 13 days. Yet the consequences still shape the modern world. Because for a brief moment in October 1962, human civilization stood at the edge of annihilation. And somehow, it stepped back. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and hit the subscribe button for more incredible stories from history.